Awakening presence in prison. When most people think of prison, the first images that arise are of confinement, punishment, and loss of freedom. It is often seen as the end of opportunities, a place where hope withers and life is reduced to survival behind walls and bars. Yet, from the perspective of spiritual awakening, prison can also become an unlikely but powerful ground for transformation. In fact, the very conditions that appear to strip a person of freedom, loss of control, external restrictions, isolation, can point toward a deeper, inner freedom that is untouched by circumstances. Eckhart Tolle often emphasizes that freedom is not primarily about what happens outside of us, but about the realization of presence within. Awakening in prison, therefore, is not only possible but, for many, can become the doorway into the deepest liberation they will ever know. 1. The illusion of external freedom. In ordinary life outside of prison, people often equate freedom with the ability to do what they want, to go where they please, to shape their environment according to their desires. Yet, as Tolle reminds us, much of what we call freedom is actually enslavement to compulsive thinking, emotional reactivity, and unconscious drives of the ego. Someone may live in a luxurious home, travel the world, and pursue endless pleasures, but if they are constantly restless, dissatisfied, or identified with the voice of fear in their minds, they are not free. Their so-called freedom is superficial. By contrast, in prison, where the external freedoms are stripped away, there exists the possibility to discover the one freedom that cannot be taken, the freedom of presence. This freedom arises when you step out of identification with thought and enter the simplicity of being aware of the aliveness within and around you in this very moment. 2. The gift hidden in confinement. From the ego's perspective, prison is a disaster. It resists, protests, blames, and constantly seeks to escape through thoughts of the past and future. The mind replays the story of how one arrived there, weaving regret, anger, and self-pity. Or it projects forward in anxiety, when will I get out? How will life be when I am free again? Yet if one begins to observe rather than become lost in these mental narratives, a subtle shift happens. The stillness of prison life, the monotony, the waiting, the absence of distractions, can bring one face to face with the present moment more directly than the frantic pace of the outside world ever could. What seems like a curse may become a gift. Confinement leaves fewer avenues for escape into outer distractions, making it easier to notice the inner restlessness and ultimately the stillness that lies beneath. 3. Meeting suffering as a teacher. Suffering is often the catalyst for awakening. Eckhart Tolle himself awakened to presence during a period of deep despair. In prison, suffering is abundant: loss of freedom, loss of relationships, harsh environments, guilt, and inner conflict. But suffering can serve a purpose. If resisted, it deepens bitterness and despair. If embraced with awareness, it can break the identification with the egoic self. The mind cries, "I cannot stand this any longer," and in that moment of intensity, something deeper arises, the awareness that hears the thought. That awareness is presence itself. Thus, suffering becomes a teacher, pointing beyond itself to the timeless dimension of being. 4. Discovering the power of the present moment. Awakening presence in prison means realizing that even though the body is confined, awareness is never confined. At any moment, one can shift attention from the endless mental commentary to the living reality of now. This can be as simple as times feeling the breath moving in and out, times noticing the sensation of the body sitting on the bed, times listening to distant sounds, the clink of keys, the echo of footsteps, times observing thoughts as they arise and pass, without being pulled into them. Each of these practices anchors one in the present moment. In that space, the walls of the prison become less oppressive because you touch a dimension within that no wall can contain. 5. Freedom beyond form. True freedom does not depend on external circumstances, but on the realization of the timeless essence within. When you awaken to presence, you see that the essence of who you are, consciousness itself, is not bound by form, identity, or physical location. A person may be imprisoned physically yet dwell in inner spaciousness and peace. Another may walk freely in the world yet live in the prison of their compulsive mind. Who, then, is truly free? This paradox reveals that awakening in prison is not only possible but can be even more accessible because the conditions force one inward. The noise of outer life is reduced, creating fertile ground for silence and awareness. 6. Transformation of identity. In prison, the old identity often crumbles. The roles that once defined a person, career, possessions, reputation, are stripped away. What remains when these outer layers dissolve? For many, this loss feels like annihilation. But from the perspective of awakening, it is an opportunity. When you are no longer propped up by outer identities, you can discover the deeper identity that does not come and go, the I am before any label. This recognition is deeply liberating. Even if the prison system labels someone as a number, an offender, or a criminal, inwardly they can awaken to the truth that their essence is untouched by those labels. 7. The prison as a monastery. Throughout history, monks, sages, and mystics have retreated into monasteries or caves to practice silence, solitude, and contemplation. In a way, prison can unintentionally become such a place. While it lacks the sacred rituals of a monastery, the conditions of solitude and stillness can serve the same function if approached with awareness. The prison cell can be transformed into a meditation hall. The hours of waiting can become hours of deepening presence. It requires a shift of perception. Instead of seeing prison only as punishment, one can see it as a space of retreat, a place to awaken to what is eternal and indestructible within. 8. Practical pathways to presence in prison. Awakening presence is not merely an abstract idea, it is cultivated through practice. Some practical ways include: 1. Breath awareness. Observing each inhalation and exhalation anchors attention in the now. 2. Body scan. Bringing awareness to the sensations of the body, noticing where tension is held and releasing it. 3. Witnessing thoughts. Watching the stream of mental activity without judgment, realizing you are not the thoughts but the awareness behind them. 4. Silent sitting. Taking time each day to sit quietly, allowing presence to arise without effort. 5. Conscious relationships. Even in prison, interactions with others can be an opportunity to practice presence, listening fully, speaking consciously, and not reacting to egoic triggers. 6. Using triggers as reminders. Each sound of a door locking, each routine announcement can become a reminder to return to presence. Over time, these practices create inner spaciousness, turning prison into a field for awakening. 9. Stories of awakening behind bars. Many accounts exist of people who discovered deep spiritual truth while incarcerated. Some describe how the silence of prison life allowed them to read spiritual texts with new depth. Others report moments of awakening while sitting alone in their cell, realizing that peace was available regardless of circumstances. Eckhart Tolle himself has spoken of how prisoners often resonate strongly with his teachings, sometimes even more than people living outside. Why? Because they have been stripped of illusions of freedom and are more open to discovering true freedom within. 10. Awakening as service. When presence awakens in prison, it not only transforms the individual but also radiates outward. A prisoner who discovers peace can become a source of light for others, fellow inmates, guards, even family members. Awakening presence reduces violence, anger, and despair. It brings compassion, forgiveness, and clarity. In this way, the awakening of one individual can begin to shift the collective atmosphere, planting seeds of healing in an environment often dominated by pain. 11. Beyond release. For many, release from prison is seen as the ultimate goal. But if awakening presence occurs, one realizes that freedom is already here. When the body is eventually released, the inner freedom continues. Life outside may bring new challenges, but the foundation of presence provides stability. Even if one remains incarcerated for life, the realization of being cannot be diminished. In that sense, a lifetime sentence can become a lifetime practice of presence, and death itself is not the end but the dissolving of form into the formless awareness that one has already touched. 12. A final reflection. Awakening presence in prison is about turning the apparent tragedy of confinement into the discovery of true freedom. The outer walls may remain, but the inner walls dissolve. The bars that once seemed to imprison reveal themselves as pointers to the boundless dimension of being. As Eckhart Tolle teaches, the present moment is the doorway to liberation. Whether you sit in a monastery, in a busy city, or behind prison bars, the door is always open if you are willing to step through. Conclusion. Prison, often seen as the end of freedom, can paradoxically become the birthplace of true freedom. By meeting suffering with awareness, letting go of identification with thought, and opening to the power of presence, a prisoner can discover liberation that no authority, no law, no lock, and no wall can ever take away. The journey of awakening presence in prison is a reminder for all of us, inside or outside, that freedom is not found in changing our circumstances, but in awakening to the timeless awareness that we are.